that we've got her back in showing and pursuing the most progressive energy agenda that this country has ever seen. That's right.
Can you respond to the Democratic Party's, the DNC's, reversal on fossil fuel donations?
You know, I think in order for us to move forward, and what Americans are asking, not just of the Democratic Party, but for all members of government, Republican, Democratic, Independent, everyone agrees that we need to get big money out of politics, and that the way future is to figure out a way where we can govern without special interests getting in the way between us and our communities.
Entirely agree. We need a way for us where big money gets between, out of us and our communities. Interestingly to note, Nancy Pelosi, she's in Nancy Pelosi's office there with the Sunrise Movement. Strangely enough, based on the argument that AOC was making in this kind of recent kerfuffle, if you want to call it that, why didn't this bring about the Green New Deal? Like, if the only way you take an action is because you have a very clear, specific win at the end of that action, just as a flat fact, wins are not absolutes. Wins are, to some degree, perspective and based on what you're trying to accomplish. You can lose in a specific event and actually win depending upon what you're trying to accomplish. Vietnam, for example. The United States loses Vietnam, not because we couldn't put all of the bodies into the ground, not because we couldn't kill millions of people, but because we couldn't win it. I'm making the point that win sometimes depends upon your objective and what people think you can accomplish versus what you can accomplish. This didn't bring about the Green New Deal. In fact, there was a vote in the Senate on the Green New Deal and it failed miserably. Why even push for that if that's the case, right? If you're not going to win in this upward just moment of glory. I guess I'm trying to make the point. Yes, I'm poking here because I'm making the point that the argument that you're not going to win the vote seems to be the most trivial of the argument, if I'm being honest. There has been a huge backlash with the Jimmy Dore issue. I'm shocked at how much attention this has gotten and how much of a back and forth this has gotten. I love how much attention this has gotten and how much back and forth this has gotten. I mean, look, to give her point, and I want to keep this video short because I don't want this one to be too long. I lounged in it yesterday. But basically, AOC's main point is, look, it may hurt us for policy. So, $15 minimum wage was the thing that she brought up in the first 100 days. You believe that Biden is going to punish Americans for $15 an hour minimum wage because you are trying to push Pelosi to do her goddamn job. I don't buy that. It's possible. I don't buy it. That says more about Biden than anything else. If Biden wants to repudiate one of his campaign pledges, which I gotta be honest, he could do all of them. And in 4 years, you will be back here trying to get him elected again. But if he wants to do that because you're trying to get Pelosi to do her job, that's on Biden. He's the one that is doing that. Let that responsibility be on him. And I gotta be honest, I don't necessarily buy that. On top of that, the second argument, you can't win it. And again, I consider this to be one of the most trivial of the arguments, to be honest. But I'll talk about it later. And the third, she'll get punished. This one is the funniest to me. In 2016, they cheated Sanders. In 2020, when he ran in Iowa, especially, they cheated him again and brazenly did it. Joe Biden basically told people, I'm not for the Green New Deal. I am not for defund the police. I would veto Medicare for all. And he's saying this in the middle of a pandemic when the overwhelming majority of Americans are for Medicare for all. The left could not punch that through. He basically paraded all of these Republicans and basically said, these are the people that we're trying to get. He gave you a minute while giving Kasich all the time in the world, who even turned around and hit you. They made it very clear that their intentions and the people who they were going to put into those offices were not on the left. And when Biden got in office, what did he do? He did exactly what you thought he'd do. He put in one creature and dinosaur after the next, all the way through his administration. Basically, we're back to the Obama eras, right? What did you get? You backed him. You supported him. You gave those task force this kind of, gravitas or whatever else, even though that stuff was nonsense. And all of you guys, from the standpoint of the left, turned around and bent over. And the point that I'm making here is that didn't serve you then, and it's not serving you now. Meaning the docility of the left for the last 40, 50 years, and all of the things that I've just mentioned, they called you everything but a child of God. They call you racist, sexist, bigoted, call you uniquely abusive to women. These were the things that they were hitting you with. And at the end of that, for nothing, getting nothing, you all back him. And he turns around and bites you. Because he was going to turn around and bite you. I guess my point is, you're worried about them punishing you. That is the funniest one. That is the funniest one, and that's maybe the saddest one. I mean, at the end of the day, and she's talking about assignments, seating assignments. There needs to be an understanding that you guys are not on the same team. I understand you caucus together and everything else, but the objectives and the things that you want are fundamentally different than the things that they want. And at some point, I think that what took place in 2020 was a travesty that the left could not get Medicare for all through in the middle of a pandemic. That travesty is now having a consequence where the left is not willing to basically take no for an answer. And how can I say they're wrong? How can I say they're wrong? I thought the inaction in the 2020 election was appalling. Think about what we're talking about here. We're talking about tens of millions of people. 3,100 people died like a couple of days ago. And the left can't get it over the finish line. And didn't even try. Yes, Sanders pushed it. But it's different than running as a campaign versus running with an issue. Meaning, the moment the Sanders ended his campaign, his job wasn't over. I'd say the same thing for AOC. I said the same thing for all of these groups. Screaming at the height of their lungs about the support that you get if you back Medicare for all. Not only would have gotten you further along from the standpoint of having your elected representatives represent your interests, not only would it have saved lives, but you also have this situation that wouldn't be taking place now, with the left being completely defeated, completely embarrassed by the number of people who Joe Biden is putting in that office that they voted for, and trying to get this. As small as this is what it wants. I guess I'm trying to make the point that the reason it wants this is because the real thing that it couldn't get happened because of the failure and the cowardice that took place when everybody laid down in 2020. Let's talk about it. I give you my reasons why I think that basically this is a good idea. And I do think the people that are pushing it against it are basically wrong. Not just wrong, I think they're missing the point. I don't think all the focus should be leveled on AOC in this way as if she is the sole and only independent person. There are like 100 people in the Progressive Caucus. And there are, 4 or 5 members of the squad. Why does this all fall to her? Where the hell have they been? But besides the point, I understand that she's a figurehead for the stuff. So, fair enough. I would say that you're not always going to get what you want. And you can't necessarily throw one individual out for something they don't necessarily like to do. But push, yes. Uncompromising, yes. Considering for the last 40, 50 years, the left has compromised and has gotten squat. Yes, Dore, as I said before, is correct. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, please like, share, and subscribe. You can always support this content through PayPal or Patreon. This content is brought to you by you, and I appreciate you the opportunity for allowing me the opportunity to do it. Look, one of the all sorts of people have been attacking Dore on this. It's been amazing, actually. He was even trending on Twitter. Tim Black even has a comment. He says, right here, asking the squad to vote against Pelosi is tantamount to asking them to quit their jobs. At least admit it. Admit it. Be real about it. Also, admit that we don't have the votes to pass Medicare for all, so in the end, the exercise to root out progressives. Good night. And at that point, he apparently immediately fell asleep. There are a few problems with this, right? I was entirely unaware that Pelosi, or that the squad, worked for Pelosi. That is shocking to me. I didn't realize she paid their salaries. On top of that, you don't have the votes. But again, it's not the point entirely about the votes. I know people keep focusing on this like, oh, you don't have the votes for Medicare for all, so you should not do it at all. You shouldn't push your congressional members at all. The win, at least in one part, is the compulsion. Think about what I am saying here. The win is the compulsion. We went through, 300,000 lives, 300,000 people. We're in the middle of a pandemic. You have 300,000 people dead. You have 14 million people infected with COVID-19. 20, 30 million people have lost their jobs. And on top of that, we're not even talking about the people who are ill and continue to be ill after the virus period of time. We're not talking about the medical bills. We're not talking about any of these things. And 20 million people, 30 million people without health care? I mean, after Obamacare was passed, you still had 20 something million people that lost their health care. You have 14 million people more that have lost their health care. 74% on the day they took office, 74% was for Medicare for all. How can you not get that through? And why is that not embarrassing? And I'm saying this from the standpoint broadly of the left. How do you have a public in a country that is dying en masse over a virus? And this country doesn't have a national healthcare system, not in real terms. And the public says, yes, we want this. We've tried Obamacare. We've seen what Trump wants to do. We want Medicare for all. Finally, we're for it. That's the public. 88% of Democrats was for it. Joe Biden, who's running head of the Democratic Party, says no and says, I would veto that. I don't care what the public wants. Nancy Pelosi says, no, I don't care what the public wants. Schumer, I don't care what the public wants. Meaning, in a representative government, supposedly anyway, your representatives basically has told the public no. And because the public doesn't necessarily have anybody to represent them, you basically have a scam where neither has to represent the interests of the public. I can go down the list. Medicare for all, expansion of Social Security, elimination of student debt, increasing the minimum wage. All of these things are popular. None of these things are the main points of agenda for the party. None. You can't get them to do their jobs at all. The left has basically co-signed this year after year after year, voting for one dino after the next, and then expecting something amazing to happen. They voted for Joe Biden. Radicals of the party went out and told people to vote Joe Biden, terrified of Donald Trump, missing the point that it is the responsibility of the candidate to get your vote. You get my vote when you represent my interests. And somewhere along the way, it has got so mangled that corporate Democrats have gotten you to basically believe that it is your job to keep them in office, as opposed to the inversion of that, which is actual representative government. You had 20, 30, 40, God knows how many people that was in that election pushing for Medicare for all. And I mean human beings and people. And when the left had the opportunity to say, look, we'll back you, but you got to back this. That opportunity gives all of these millions of people to realize, oh wait, there's a negotiation going on, and I'm taking a side of this negotiation, just like what is taking place right now with Dore and AOC. I'm making the point that the conversation didn't even take place. The fight didn't even take place. The left literally bent over and spread their ass cheeks for Joe Biden. I'm saying that is a failure. We have a moral obligation, ethical obligation, to not allow candidates to basically walk in because we're so terrified of the other guy. The response should have been, you will lose if you don't back Medicare for all. And it should have been a demand made by the public, led by the left. And I tell you this, you have one or two options, right? Either the Democratic Party tells 20, 30 million people, I don't care about your demand. We will prefer to lose to Trump as opposed to accept the precedent set by us kneeling to the whims of the public in the way that a representative government is supposed to actually perform. Or they can appropriate the position. However they modify it, they can appropriate the position. And in doing so, bringing all of those people, all of that energy with them to win. They didn't care about that because they understood that the overwhelming majority of the left and blacks were still going to get their vote. Meaning, your unconditional support incentivizes me to not give a shit about you. And because I know that you're going to back me either way, yes, I'm going to go sniff in the skirt of Republicans. Yes, I'm going to talk shit about you. Yes, I'm going to call you uniquely evil. Yes, I'm going to cheat you in 2016. Yes, I am going to do whatever I want. I'm going to put all of these all guys in. I'm going to put all of these defense guys in. I'm going to do all of that stuff. And that's going to be after using your guy as basically a sheepdog and a prop to pretend as if these task forces are anything but for us. With Sanders afterwards, I don't think Joe Biden is looking out for the interests of all the progressives that put him in office. I don't think he is. You don't think he is, huh? You don't think he is, huh? The very point of compulsion in and of itself is a win. The very fact that this conversation is taking place is a win. The idea that you would be able to use leverage to get a political person to do their goddamn jobs is a win. I am making the point that the back and forth, the fighting, I get it. This is something that is new to the left. Oh, people are trying to get us to act, but we're so terrified. We're so terrified. Look, you've been terrified for the last 40, 50 years. At which point do you stop being that way? And at which point do you start realizing that not acting, not pushing, not to some degree being belligerent, not being a radical, not being willing to take no is possibly the way forward and possibly gets you more bang for your buck, even if you lose the vote itself. And again, I make this point, you act because you can. You act because it shows what political leverage is to a population that has no clue. You act because, frankly, you should have acted before the election. Right now, your decision space has been constrained to this kind of theatrical vote of just showing force and showing the ability that you can compel leverage in the political space. But there was the potential for something real in 2020 from the standpoint of using that as a tip of the spear to push. Something real. At least I think so. At this point, I see nothing wrong with continuing that tradition if it gets across this is what politics is. It's leverage. And cowardice compels no leverage. And to have, 90% of blacks vote Democrat? And how many lefties? Like 70%? And you still walk out with nothing? Do you think that's a win? Do you think that's been productive in regards to politics? Do you think the way the left looks now, demoralized, because they basically voted for a man that then did exactly what they thought he was going to do afterwards? I'm saying that is not the way politics functions. And all of those people that represent the interests of that particular policy is a coalition. It is a caucus. That caucus compels weight, and that caucus should have been weighed against the balance of the Democratic Party in order to push this through in 2020. Everything that's taking place right now is just a consequence. And fact of the matter is that fight that's taking place right now should have taken place in 2020, not over Pelosi, but over Joe Biden himself. This is where we are. Can't go back in time. This is what you got. You act because Nancy Pelosi is a capitalist. She has want. And as a capitalist, she understands that wants have causes, cost. And in this case, the cost is either a vote on Medicare for all or something else of similar value. Yeah, I don't think the idea is bad. And it's not Jimmy Dore's job to be sensible or sane or to not yell. That's not his job. You have, 99% of people that do that. His job is to be belligerent. And I got to be honest, it's the radicals of the world that pull people into the particular direction, not because they're sensible and rational in regards to what is taking place in the very specific moment, but because they're unyielding and pushing for those particular things in a world that refuses to do what's right. This world is refusing to do what's right. And part and parcel to that is the action, the behavior of the left for the last 40 years, but especially in 2020 and not taking the opportunity. It needs to understand what political leverage is. And if it takes this event to do so, then in and of itself, it's a win. I think it's a win. Also, you do point out who's fake, which to me sounds like a win. If AOC really wants to get Medicare for all passed, she is not going to do it with the dinosaurs that are in office. As she said, you got to primary some folks. The Democratic Party, that sounds, at the very least in some offhand way that she's trying to protect, took policy positions from the DSCC and the DCCC, in order to keep people like AOC, people like Ilhan Omar, Rashid Tlaib, Bowman, to keep these people out of Congress. It was because AOC realized, I want to pass these policies and I need people like me in office. They actively stopped you. They were actively working to stop people like you from getting in Congress. You're not on the same side. I guess that's the point that I'm trying to make here. They were perfectly willing to put a knife in you and people like you, putting money and investing money into candidates that would be opposed to the things that you would be opposed, that you would be for. In fact, Nancy Pelosi seemed to have no problem at all going after progressives, or at the very least people who fund those progressives, meaning she was backing the policy of the DSCC and the DCCC. But when it came to John Kennedy against Markey, not so much. She gave it a pass. Nancy Pelosi understands that the goal of politics is leverage. Either you have it or you have the whims of it. And for the longest time, progressives haven't even had the spine to use it. Use it. Right here. Right here. You get to point out to people who are fake lefties, especially on the issue of Medicare for all. And when you, getting your coalition together, run for office again, you should have people who push for Medicare for all, who's using the fact that these people are voting against Medicare for all with 90-something% or with 70-something% approval in the midst of a pandemic with 300,000 people dead. Each and every candidate that you have running against every dinosaur that refuses to back Medicare for all in a pandemic to do their job, to do their ethical responsibility, should get primaried. And you should be using that vote as a tip of the spear. If indeed you believe Medicare for all is popular. I'm making the point that there are political gains that you get out of this, in addition to showing the left that there's political leverage. You don't need to win the floor vote to get advantages out of the fact that you can compel the floor vote. And to be honest, it doesn't even need to be specifically Medicare for all. This is somewhat just a figurehead at this point. This conversation, believe it or not, as maddening as it could be, is productive. I mean, ultimately, I don't think the objective is to eat each other alive over this stuff, even though I know sometimes it happens. And I would say or argue that this is a consequence of this conversation not taking place before the election regarding Joe Biden, to put this fear of death into Joe Biden that he would potentially lose, that at the very least give some eye to show a little bit of leg to the Medicare for all thing. Instead, it was complete and utter outright capitulation. Complete capitulation. 74%. You have 100 members of the Progressive Caucus, if not more. I mean, are you kidding me? How do you get 74% of the public backing something with 100 members of people who call themselves progressives in the Progressive Caucus? And in 2020, with a pandemic that eliminates 300,000 people from the face of this earth, 14 million at this point, infected with that virus, and the numbers are spiking daily. 3,100 died the other day. And for whatever reason, Democrats can't be bothered to push for Medicare for all, nor are they held to have any consequence for not doing so, despite the fact that there should be a deep and abiding penalty for anybody that would be against Medicare in a pandemic. No, personally, I think Dore's right. I think there's a case to be made that this vote, or that the push, should take place. Like I said, it's not his job to be the rational one. His job is to push him to be the radical. He's doing his job. His point is that Congress should do theirs, especially from the standpoint of the left. Like, share, subscribe. Thanks all.